Good afternoon. Today is Sunday, March 28th, 2021. Hope everybody is having a blessed Palm Sunday. This afternoon, I'd like to talk about two people who are very special to me, who passed away on this day 8 years apart. My grandmother, Guri McPherson, as my maternal grandmother, died on March 28th, 1970. That was 51 years ago. And her son-in-law, my father, James D Ozil, so you can get a picture of my parents there, died March 28th, 1978, which was 43 years ago. And I think about both of them on this day. My grandmother was born on October the 5th, 1882, in Alabama. I'm not sure how old she was when she came to Texas. She was married to a man named Arthur D. Bean, and then to another man named McPherson. She and Grandpa Bean had 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. The youngest child was my mother, Clyde Frances Bean. And I've been called a menopause child because my mother was 38 and my father was, I believe, like 45 when I was born. And my oldest sister Betty was already married and had a child, so I actually have a niece who's older than me. My siblings were so much older than me that growing up it was like being an only child. At our house in Waco, it was like a duplex, and we had 2 sides of it, and we lived on one side. My grandmother lived on the other side with her own kitchen and dining room, bedroom, etc. And my grandmother, the other grandkids referred to her as Granny, but for some reason I always knew her as Mammy. She raised me from the time I was born. And so I was born in 1951, and when she died in 1970, I was 18, almost 19. So I remember her quite well. And from what I understand, during her working years, she and Grandpa McPherson, Grandpa Mac, I never knew him because he died before I was born, as did my biological grandfather, A.D. Bean. Didn't know either one of them. But he ran a hotel in Waco, and I think they were by the railroad tracks, and most of the people that stayed there were people who worked on the railroad. And so there's a lot of stories about that old hotel, and I've heard about them, but again, that was all before my time. So we see that I can remember my mother took care of her the best she could until she got to the point that she couldn't take care of her anymore, and she had to be placed in a nursing home, which she thought was the worst thing in the world. In her mind, she identified the nursing homes of the old county poor farm, which was atrocious. March 28th, 1978 was a Saturday, and it was a day. At the time I was a student at McLennan Community College, and I was also working as a membership representative for the American Automobile Association, the AAA Motor Club. And at the time I was completing my term as Master Counselor of Waco Chapter, Order of D Malay. I had just a few weeks left in my term, and I had just recently been elected President of the McLennan County Baptist Student Union. I thoroughly enjoyed my term in D Malay, but with these new duties in BSU, I felt like it was time to give it up. I really didn't have time to be the head of two different organizations. But anyway, I was feeling pretty good about myself at that time. And the Bible says, pride goeth before destruction, haughty spirit before a fall. You know, I thought I was pretty important. Well, on the day my grandmother died, I was in an automobile accident. Wrecked my car up really bad, and it was my fault. I wasn't injured, thank God. But I had to be towed home. And because it would be several weeks before I got my car fixed, I eventually did. And so that was a blessing. Because the job I had required me to use my car, that meant during that period I was unable to work. You're talking about a humbling experience. God had a way of showing me that I wasn't as important as I thought I was, and I had to depend on Him. It was a day or two afterward that I opened my Bible to Psalm 4:8, where it says, Thou makest me dwell in safety. And that was a wonderful message that I needed to hear at that time. But in the meantime, you know, there was something about that accident occurring on the day of my grandmother's death. 2 days later, Monday, March 30th, her funeral was held. And I remember a lot of people were there. A lot of family and quite a few of my friends came, and that was helpful. And again, she had raised me. And from the time I was born, she helped my mother raise me. And she was very much a part of our life and of our home. I heard my dad say on one occasion regarding her, he said some people don't even like their mother-in-law, and I love her. We had a good relationship. And my father, again, was her son-in-law. And it was exactly 8 years later that he passed away. His full name was James D Ozil. D is not just an initial, but name, D-E-E. Growing up, he was never called James, he was called D. And he had the nickname of Red. Now, he already had gray hair when I came along. I understand he had red hair growing up. He was born in the Vaughn community of Hill County, Texas, September 20th, 1905. The son of George Wallace Ozil and Mary Reinhardt Ozil. His grandfather's name was Jason Deshay Ozil, and Jason was born in Muhlenberg County, Kentucky. I visited there in 1996. There's quite a few Ozils still there. And George Ozil served as Deputy Marshal in Indian Territory. He married Mary Reinhardt, the daughter of Reverend Christian Reinhardt, a Methodist circuit rider who was reportedly part Shawnee. And hopefully at some time in the future I'll be able to do some research on the life of my great-grandfather. But they married in Clarksville, Red River County, Texas. That's right on the Oklahoma border. They married in 1890. I've seen a copy of their marriage certificate. They settled in Central Texas where they farmed and raised their family. On May 11th, 1929, Red Ozil married Clyde Francis Bean. And 4 children were born to this union. Betty Jean Ozil, who married Leslie Rawls. Betty was born in 1932 and died in 2001. Miriam Vale Ozil later married Phil Darby, born in 1935, lives in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And James D. Ozil Jr. was born in 1938. And it's my understanding that during the Great Depression there was an oil boom. There were more jobs in Tyler than there were in Waco. And so my mother and dad moved to Tyler. And there my 3 siblings were born. On May 11th, 1945, of their 16th wedding anniversary, they moved from Tyler to Waco. And my mother worked for a while at the soda fountain in Pipkin's drugstore, but in August of 1950, at the age of 38, she experienced an unexpected pregnancy. On May 22nd, 1951, I was born, and she never worked outside the house during my lifetime. And they my dad worked throughout my lifetime in the tire business. He worked hard, got real dirty. He was a tire retreader. He knew he knew his job. He knew what to do. And that was the only kind of work I knew of him doing. My brother Jim later went into the tire business, but he was on the management end. He ended up owning his own tire shop before he retired. I remember when my brother-in-law Leslie Rawls, Betty's husband, by the way, my middle name is Leslie after Leslie Rawls. I'm quite proud of that fact because Leslie was quite a guy with the best sense of humor of anyone I ever knew. He could have made it as a comedian. But we're at the house before his funeral, and my sister Betty introduced me to a friend, and this is my brother. And she said, "Are you the one that's in the tire business?" And I had to laugh. No way. That doesn't fit at all. But anyway, my dad only went to about the 8th grade in school. Nevertheless, he was very intelligent and very well read. One thing he really enjoyed was hot rod racing. He often accompanied my late cousin Bill Ozil, the son of his older brother Frank, to the Heart of Texas Speedway in Elmont. And sometimes Bill's son Billy Todd and I would go along with them. Billy, I think, is in Florida now. We reconnected a few years ago. Love to see him again. I didn't inherit that love of racing at all, but I told Billy if he was ever in Texas, I think they still have those races on Friday nights, and if he wanted to go, I'd like to go with him for old time's sake. But anyway, have memories of that speedway. My dad took great pride in his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren. And he and my mom were married for 48 years and 10 months. My siblings and I had hoped to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary, but that didn't happen. I remember in 1973, my father experienced congestive heart failure, was in the hospital for a while, and this was in the spring. I graduated from Baylor with my BA degree on May 18th, 1973. My parents were unable to attend the ceremony because of my dad's health. 3 years later, when I got my master's degree, May 14th, 1976, he was up and about doing much better, and they did attend, and we're very proud. But he became semi-retired. By that time, my brother Jim had a tire place of his own, and Dad worked for him part-time. I was told that when he went to work there, he didn't expect to be on salary, but he would fix a tire and keep the money that he got for fixing it. And I understand my brother and my dad had a very good relationship on the job. I would drop by there occasionally, and in 1977, I think, he had another spell of a heart attack and had to be in the hospital. I was living in Dallas then. I came down to Waco to visit him. And it was on March 28th, 1978. I was living in Dallas, where I was serving as pastor of Emmanuel AME Church. I was also working for the Texas Department of Human Resources in Fort Worth. And sometimes you have a gut level feeling when you get a call. And my phone rang at my desk, and I was sitting and I was talking with my supervisor in his office, and a colleague took the call and came and got me to take the call, and something told me who it was and what it was about. And just as I expected, my sister Betty said it was there. She said, Bobby, I don't know how to tell you this, but Daddy's gone. His funeral was held in Waco 2 days later. It wasn't until 1981 that my son, Robert Elton Ozil, later known as Rob, was born. And I regret that my dad never had the chance to know him. I'd like to think they would have hit it off well. My mother at the time was a member of Gateway Baptist Church, 26th and Morrow in Waco, under the leadership of Reverend Noel V. Geis and later Reverend E.J. Culp. Brother Geis was the same age as my dad. He attended the same country school in which they shared a double desk in the community of Chalk Bluff near Waco. And when he delivered the eulogy, he said, many years ago, old country school at Chalk Bluff, there was one of them old double desks. Some of you here may remember those old desks. Two boys sat at one of those desks. I was one of those boys, and D Ozil was the other. And by the way, it was under Brother Geis that in the 1960s I was converted, baptized, and called to the ministry. And at the cemetery, following the committal service, I talked with him and introduced him to my wife Deborah, and I said, Brother Geis, since I saw you last, I've been through a lot of changes. I've been in a lot of situations. I've just been through a lot of things, period, but there's many things you taught me that are with me forever, that I'll never get away from, because it was under you I got my foundation in the Word of God. And later my mother told me that Brother Geis's wife had told her that I said some stuff to him at the cemetery that really made him feel good, which in turn made me feel good. Brother Geis passed away in 1998 at the age of 93. In his last years, I visited with him a number of times at his home in Chalk Bluff, and when I was young, he ministered to me. When he was old, I ministered to him. Brother Culp, who succeeded Brother Geis as pastor at Gateway, visited my dad every day he was in the hospital before he died. And he pointed out he was not a great church-going man. That's true. I can remember the times he went to church on one hand. I can count them. But he was convinced, Brother Culp was, that Dad had saving faith in Jesus Christ and thus was prepared for death. Our family took great comfort in this. And so, it was my 43 years ago, he died. And 2 days later he was buried. He died on the 8th anniversary of my grandmother, his mother-in-law's death. And so 51 years since my grandmother, 43 years since my dad. I wish to pay tribute to these special people. I love you, Dad. I love you, Mammy. I'll see both of you again someday. Have a great day.